the 1971 Progress Report, which is Progress Report number.
Believing that we were not going to make it as a people for saving our sanity. Now, he began the collecting of funds for the ships, the Black Star Line. This would lead to difficulty later, but the main thing is that the Black Star Line was part of the concept of nation. He discovered that the shipping lines were so costly, and even transferring goods and services between African nations and African nations. He dreamed of a steamship line where Africans could connect with each other and trade with each other on terms. He prophesied the modern age. Now let's look at what could have been.
Imhotep was the man that designed the step pyramid of Saqqara out of solid stone, no brick made of any material, much less more, mud and straw. The step pyramid of Saqqara is in the 3rd dynasty. Imhotep designed it and built it for the pharaoh Zusa. So now we spell Africa A-F-R-O-C-A. Africa. But God will maintain it. Just like the other day I heard BrotherRonn gave us the cornrow. I don't know if now I know I'm 69. I know BrotherRonn isn't 69. Now I know I saw my mother when I was knee-high to a grasshopper, cornrowing her own hair, cornrowing my sister here.
For free white Protestant males, middle class and up, those who agreed with the prevailing political status quo and who own property. Everybody else in the country is second. Catholic, Jews, everybody. Second to that. Women too. Women got to vote day before yesterday. No, the convention movement really started in the 19th century.
Right. I'm familiar with that, but I'm talking about in terms of the 70s.
Yellow Jews. But when you say white Jews are white. In white good society. You doubt it? Move in a white.
They were the ones that were dishing it out, as bad as it was. They were the ones that were whipping us. They were the ones that were burning us at fire. They were the ones that were chopping our legs off. When you have 400-500 years of that, you tell me any race, that race that is doing that is going to respect the other one? No. Van Sertima says, and those words always stick in my mind. He says, they look at us as stunned survivors who are scratching and groping on the periphery of civilization and in fact still depending on the strong civilization of the West to give us life and the necessities that go with life. Is considered one of the great scholars of the world, as far as they're concerned. He can write histories of Europe, of Britain. He can write about the Second World War. He can write about their great prime ministers and other people, their great queens and all of that. He can write these, what you call, these august volumes about these people. And yet, when it comes to Africa, he can be so stupid. And I use the word stupid, but I'll have to change this word in a minute. Because when I tell you, the man could write in a book that it is then and only then we will walk as we want to walk in the world. We don't want to put hands and hug hands and kiss with these people. We don't. But we want them to be in a position where they cannot harm our children and our children's children, and they cannot harm us. They cannot harm Japan today. They are now saying if Japan pulls out in certain things, the recession is going to be even worse if Japan. So they were saying it on some discussion they had on television last night. They're going to be worse if Japan. Can you imagine that? It's a hell of a thing to say. Japan, they gave it a whipping 45 years ago. They dropped bombs, atomic bombs on the country, and now they're depending on those people to get them out of the soup inside. But those outside have another way to fight. Maybe that's true. But those inside, what I would like to tell Reverend Al, those inside ain't fighting at all. They ain't fighting at all. They're fighting for increase of money, or they're fighting to looking for a scam. This is what they're fighting for. It is those outside that's going to shake the apple tree for the apples to fall. The ones outside, it has always shown to be the same thing. And so, when Reverend Al gets inside there, he's going to have a rough time. Countries in the Caribbean where they speak a Creole, you cannot go to school and pass any exam in Creole. If you're in an English-speaking country, you got to pass that exam in English. Your papers have to be corrected in England. If you're in a French country, you have to do it in French. A French colony then. The same thing with the Spanish. You know their national languages in the Hispanic areas. You go into a home now, it can be in the most rural of rural areas. There is a big fridge in the place that can hide and where they want you to study. And they have internships and all that kind of thing. So we in the Caribbean think, as African people, our people are getting something. But what we are getting in those terms, a chicken feed compared to what the condition of the United States in the Americas. The United States has visioned itself as a dominating country in this hemisphere. For military reasons, for strategic reasons, for trade reasons, for everything. It has decided that it must have an empire here. And now, being that it stands almost alone in its might, its eyes have turned to the rest of the world. And comes the roots.
He knows all of the ologies of linguistic background. As you have documented very well, some blacks have apparently interjected African language patterns into English while others have not. Now, let me show you how Eurocentric this Negro is. We were speaking African languages, and we were now being introduced to the English language. So if you are not speaking English like the English people speak it, you're not interjecting African features into English. You're retaining African features and adopting English as you best understand it. I've already given a lecture on linguistic retentions. So you understand then that this man is operating from a premise that we already speak in English, and now we adopting some African features into our English.
Ways you can be of limited English proficient. You weren't born in the United States, so you had to be born somewhere where English wasn't the primary language. Or simply if your primary language or native language is a language other than English. B, individuals who come from environments where a language other than English is dominant. And when they say environments where a language other than English is dominant, they're saying that you can be born on the soil that is called the United States of America, just like Native Americans are born on territories in the geographical area that encompasses the United States of America. But to the extent that Native Americans have been born in social isolation on reservations, the language they acquire in that environment is Yaqui, Navajo, Sioux, Iroquois, Mohawk, Mohican, or whatever tribal dialect of the Native American language they were exposed to.
Do you want your grandchildren to be colored? Do you want your great-grandchildren to be colored? Do you want your great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren to be colored? I'm polite and they're polite. What do they say? No. Meaning they don't want to disappear. So I said, if you mean this, then you have to do certain specific things in all of these areas of activity. But anyway, talking to patients and seeing this gigantic monster in the middle of their history about racism, I said, I've got to really understand racism in depth. And the training program that I was in, it was at a federal government hospital. All the people in charge of the training program were white people. And they actually taught us, there were a few black residents, I think 3 out of 12, that black people did not have the intellectual potential to benefit from psychotherapy. Movie for colored girls. See, because we don't have a clue. We don't have a clue about what is going on. See, we've been thinking, and God bless Dr. Martin Luther King, a minister but a great political scientist. He said it's about love. Everybody should love. And he got killed. And I say the reason being that if everybody on the planet, all these people, white, non-white, loved, and the love of black people, what white people talk about when there's no black people around. They all go silent. Because what are they talking about? They're either talking directly or in code about white genetic survival. I had a white college professor say to me after I had been invited to speak at a prison, white university, giving. So my first reaction is, oh my God. The second reaction, if a word or a phrase is used with high frequency, there has to be a reason behind it. So I said to myself, in the system of racism, white supremacy, there are 5 people categories. Man, see that the system has figured out in formal slavery, when the white slave master would be rapidly in a state of not caring about ourselves, we won't even raise the question. We will not raise the question because, what, I don't care about myself? I don't like the way I look? It's okay if I'm dead. So, what? It's not about frightening, it's about, see, and I say this, that the creator of the universe made black people the first people. I'm not talking about a monkey. The first human being.
That gosh, they talk negatively about color, but in the summer and in the winter, tanning is gotta be tan. Gotta go to the suntan parlor, even when it's snow on the ground. A white student told me, I believe it was at George Washington or Georgetown University some time ago, and I was talking to these white students about racism, and the white student said, Dr. Welsing, did you know that we compete in the summer to see who can get the darkest? See, we didn't know that on our side of the significance, and we realized. And then it just clicked into my brain computer. It's 2 series of ball games, Francis. Big brown and small white. And what balls are we talking about, really? These balls. Isn't that something? And what does the culture say? Keep your eye on the ball. See, we thought that meant as the baseball comes towards the bat, you keep watching it. No, it means these balls. You have to keep your eyes on these balls in order to prevent white genetic annihilation. Is that right, class? So every season has to focus on balls. Is that right? What are the ball game supremacy doing other than trying to make absolute, go on the football field, imagine a football player, I hate to go to school and come out and get a WPA job, not job training. Make a job, we don't have a job. But we are getting ourselves free from the deception imposed by other people and how we learn how to deceive ourselves. We've got to be able to up. That's why it's important to talk about black genetic inferiority, because they keep saying, look at them, look at them. Here in Dallas or New Orleans, but it is also all over the world. There is no place on planet Earth where racism defined as white supremacy does not exist. It is everywhere. He went further to say, unlike Carl, atop the areas of people activity, the next level has to do with what has happened to us. And what has happened to us is that we have learned to despise and to hate melanin. And as a result of that, we do not have unity and we do not have the force and power that we need to bring about justice. Some of the forms of that hate are reflected in patterns of behavior such as gossiping. Ladies, don't try it. If a female decides that she's going to force the male to have sexual intercourse and she gets a Uzi or M16 rifle and she approaches him and she frightens him to death, there's not going to be any performance. Okay. Right? Right. Okay. So that the question about genetic dominance is a question that concerns gentlemen. And so I said in the paper that I wrote some time ago that if you look, that's the, head-on front view of male genitalia, but this is a lateral view. And if you make an abstraction, and the brain makes abstractions all the time, I guess that's this is the key that you have to keep in mind. The key is male genitalia, and the real key is black male genitalia. The concern of the entire white supremacy system and culture revolves around this issue. Okay, what are these things called? Testicles. Scientific, they're going to look up and we will have solved this problem. Okay? If you deprive children of adequate lap time, you saw the little baby that was up on the stage? That little baby is real cool. You lift it up in the air and it doesn't even make a whimper. That's because that baby has a whole lot of lap time. Parents stand up and take praise, okay? But if you don't give children, and it's not because parents are bad, it is because we are under the horrendous stress of war. Back and say, we can't give one man, one vote to that. Do you understand? Same here. White supremacy functions passed. They were motherfucker. So I said, this must mean something. That's really how I came upon the ball games, because it was so quiet one Sunday. It was so quiet, and you can really think when it's quiet, which is why they encourage us to have a whole lot of noise. Because the brain hums when it's quiet. So I said, ooh, it's so quiet and nice. Something must be going on. And then it clicked, the ball games. And so that's how I said, oh, they've got to mean something more than just at the surface what we thought. So I heard this so many times, and I said, this is groped for answers, but that they came to him in flashes of inspiration as he walked in the woods. Carver is described as once staring at the peanut plant and asking, what did the Lord make you for? From Dr. Carver's inquiries to plants, from the leaves, roots, stems, and fruits of 28 plants, he was able to coax 536 separate dyes, which could be used to color wool, cotton, linen, silk, and even leather, producing 49 of them from the Scuppernong grape alone. Now, Dr. Carver didn't have any big fancy laboratories. You see, and people wondered how on earth was he able to manifest justice and peace on the planet Earth. In closing, I would like to share the Crest theory on the Uri Geller effect. Uri Geller is the Israeli psychic. How many people have seen Uri Geller? Okay, TV or something like that, right? He is capable of bending metal, causing metal to bend through a TV set. I know people who had stuff bend in their house, and he's in New York and the stuff bent in Washington. He caused computers to stop at Stanford University. Geller's skin appears white. They probably wouldn't be interested in him if it wasn't. But his eyes and his hair are very black. At some point, somebody made a mistake, some reporter, and said his eyes were blue. Check it. His eyes were very black, indicating that he could have internal centers.
That's why he was talking about segregating Gargot. But when other people come, because of their inability to understand the sophistication and advanced stage of our own science, they began to treat. That's why he was talking about lynching. Do you understand me? Mm-hmm. That is the mentality that was going on. So, but that's their own game plan. But God is their own. So that's their own so-called world order. Okay, whether it's old or new or whatever, it's a world order, as according to them. However, God's order is the only order, which is Gargot. And that order exactly contradicts the order that they're supposed to be hearing for 2,500 years. That's what's the difficulty. That's what is hard. That is what is hard to believe or hear. You understand? Because if God was their common denominator, there would be no differences. So the difference began with the prophet for each religion. That's where the difference is supposed to be. Because if they were both focusing on the same God, first of all, those prophets will be talking the same language and the focus will be on God. But the focus is diverted from God because the focus became that of the prophet. Do you understand? Do you understand that?
Yeah.
The prophets, took the place of God in effect, which becomes the basis of the differences that become so serious they begin to war among themselves. But if you go back,
Muhammad is
yes, Muhammad again is an African name, very loud and clear. Both this is just like mathematics. Mathematics is another. In fact, the word Amokidojo is actually Amama is really what mathematics is. Okay, although in the mathematics they put Ma'at. Instead of calling it Ma, they add the T at the end of it, okay? But the key word is Ma, which means the same thing. Both Pharaoh and Ata means father. Do you understand?
Yeah.
No, so it is during those time and a little extension and around that area that Muhammad was crowned the Amor. Both Muhammad and I were crowned by Amor, and the traditional person that does that is the king or the Patah. Do you understand? Or the one of the high-ranking people in the society. Even try to hold back a little bit. That's why I caution anybody, including yourself, because if you don't want to embarrass yourself, ask questions. It's better. That is a logical, consistent in terms of a good aspect of Boko Haram, but what is used for is destructive, so it negates that particular dynamic. Either way, Gaga solves the problem both ways. You go to the origin of things, and then you see the commonality. You understand? Just like if you go to God, you have unity. Okay? You have a family reunion. when you go to the first Brown and your wife's family, they are, you know, they are the same generation as you. Do you understand me?
I didn't do it, so you must get your hug.
Peculiar characteristic that you can't take two solutions and add them like you would do in a linear case. Okay, 2 plus 2 is not equal 4 in a nonlinear area. So he couldn't do that. So therefore, he couldn't add the gravity to electromagnetic in the transformed plane. That was basically his problem.
Okay.
And so, and I will tell you how we got around that, you know, eventually. So, and of course, people have been searching, you know, all kinds of transformations. In other words, what you hear, when you hear about work on unified field theory, people are looking for geometry that will accommodate more than one field, okay? Gravity, and, you know, and the rest, okay, together, okay? From the human point, you can write down the solution of this unified field equation. Okay, Eta sub n. And Eta sub n has been visited by, in a partial term, by every, well, Einstein, Maxwell, Newton, everybody, in, you know, in various partial forms. They were visited that. So this one came out without any assumption, any, you know, it purely came out of the mathematics of the unified field theory. So when we go through that, the solution to this equation, the unified field equation, is given by that equation of 318. That's the solution.
318 or 319?
That's right here. Okay.
318.
That's right. That is the solution. In other words, if you put those, that's G00 there, you know, and all down the line, okay? If you put that in this unified field equation, when you are putting the J's, okay, you put that in, that will be satisfied completely. This equation's here.
Okay.
All right, so then you go in, since it's a flux per unit area, you will integrate to listen, we're going to have to throw out and, you know, they give him a certificate. Okay? The company, of course, makes progress. Then, the school itself needs manpower. Employment. Okay? So it is the leftovers from that situation that the rest of us struggle for. Okay, leftover. So when they're talking about 6% unemployment rate for whatever, you know, ours is so different. Somebody said the other day, something like twice. That's an understatement. If you hear the real figure, you will be shocked. It's more like 70%. 70, that's correct. You're not going to take them. That would, they don't want the character of the color then to change that drastically.
But they want to have, they always want to control something that nobody of their caliber understands.
But that's where we are. That's where we are right now. If you go on the internet, there's a discussion going on from Brown, Cornell, and one of those California education universities, where a question is asked. I'm I don't think I'm quoting it exactly, but it says, does anyone understand Professor Yibo's work? That's thrown on the net. Okay? Does anyone understand Professor Yibo's work? SF. Okay? And this is the width. Okay? All right? The ranges are this value here, basically about here, here, and here. Okay? Here is it goes, goes out to go a little further. Okay? But this one here, so if you say that this is strong here, this is 1 or 0, this will be pretty close to 0. Okay? So you need a magnifying glass. It's also called some other displacements. One is in one direction and one is in another. You have different directions. So you have the magnitude, which is the distance, and then the direction, which, gives their orientation. Okay? That comes into application when you're looking at a curve like that. Okay? 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 Comes into application when you look at isomorphism, man. That's what isomorphism. You understand? So, man, people are going to be pissed and so discuss what the hell. You could go here without affecting here. You just keep on going. You don't touch this at all. Similarly, if you're going here, you don't have to, this is not touched at all. Okay? And if you are going over here, these two are not touched. Okay? So they're considered independent. So that forms what you call an orthogonal triad. Okay? An orthogonal. Orthogonal means that they are 90 degrees apart. Okay? 90 degrees. Okay? They don't have impact on one another at all. Okay? This one here would be similar. Okay? 90 degrees. They are mutually orthogonal. Mutual.
Because of the civil wars that they were having. And you have to understand one thing. This is very, very sacred to an African. His ethnicity, or the group from which he came. What you call a tribe. First, the individual, right? Then the clan, as it comes up. And you have the tribe and all of these other stuff. Now, Africans are taught that his tribe, his group, his ethnic group comes first, last, and foremost. Which means that Reverend Brown is just like we're from New York. If I go to North Carolina and I'm in a position of giving people jobs, the religious figures in there, Jacob and all them, all right. So one of the Muslim brothers struck Dr. Ben one day in the street. As we were crossing the sidewalk, 7th Avenue, he swung and hit Dr. Ben up against the head. Wow! And Dr. Ben reached in his pocket, and we said, I am another guy. No. Leave it. And so Dr. Ben said, we will tell Captain Joseph. Because the guy was mad with him for saying that Bilal was responsible for the knowledge of the religion to Muhammad, the prophet. Now, when Elijah Muhammad's son came out and changed the name of the paper to Bilalian News, a lot of the Muslims came looking to me to try to buy the book, African Origins and Major Western Religion. You see how things changes? Okay. Now, here is this teaching, this Christian teaching. Muhammad fled from Mecca, and his
I'd like to ask your permission to speak. Thank you.
Out of our distal past uncritically. The symbol users, that means everyone, particularly our artists, must have garnered as best as possible an authentic, holistic interpretation of those symbols. And
I'd like to ask your permission to speak.
Did not the daughters of our land, Africa, possess a delicacy of manners combined with gentleness and dignity? Did not their pure minds hold vice in abhorrence and contempt? Did not they frown when their ears were polluted with vile accents? Would not their influence become powerful? And she said, where is the youth who has written upon his or hers manly brow a thirst for pure knowledge, whose ambitious mind soars above trifles and longs for the time when he or she can plead the cause of his people? Have the sons of Africa no souls in the body of Christ? But in Kemet, you had a choice. A modern perspective tells us of the need for philosophical humility. That is, that there is no finality to the human quest to understand itself in relation to others and to the cosmos. We must be vigilant and deconstruct all transphysical speculations about the nature of existence and knowledge, to recognize and sort out the ambivalences, contradictions, and inconsistencies in our thinking. Now, this is similar to the Buddhist view. Now, this is all part of my art. See, that's why I can make the claim that it is an overarching cultural imperative. A modern perspective tells us
1982, folks, and these people who did this study were white. You see why I got lost? Michael J. Barrett in the November 1990 Atlantic Monthly makes the case for more schools to improve American student achievement. In a comparison with 12th grade students internationally, the United States ranked 12th among 15 nations, with Hong Kong, Japan, Finland, England, Sweden, Israel, New Zealand, Flemish Belgium, Ontario, Scotland, British Columbia, and Hungary ahead of the United States in advanced algebra, functions, calculus, and math. Right. As Martin Bernard says, Aristotle said this: the races that live in cold regions and those of Europe are full of courage and passion, but somewhat lacking in skill and brain power. Well, I was not taught that Aristotle's a racist. They forgot to do that. Now, this other ignorant journalist named John Leo, on November the 12th, 1990, in U.S. News and World Report, he said, under the banner of multicultural...
The reaction to the Afrocentric educational movement, it is clear that it is a psychopathic, psychiatric response. It is that they recognize that those desire, thought, and action could become more better too. That they could be submitted to transformation. And that you don't stay at the point of desire, but you move to its higher level. You transform through the process of education, through the process of development, you transform my instinct of desire to my instinct of pure love. So when I see sister, at first it's just biological stuff. It's just recognizing that she looks good, that she stimulates certain things that have to do with chemical imbalances, shifting and moving in my beingness. But as I become more better, I recognize that sister is not that stimulus for sexual excitation, but sister is a reflection of myself.
Oh, hallelujah. Let us pull one of our hands in love. Let us pull one of them.
Great pleasure, and with all sincerity from the depth of my soul, a man whom I...
Get him because he's standing out in the middle of Hollywood and the Sunset Strip part in the traffic, you know. So he got carried away in the road, you know. All right. But it's not real. The reality, and we're going to deal with that history tonight, is every prophet that we know to come from any land in the ancient world was a black prophet. That we can prove without a shadow of a doubt. That's not putting down any race or anything. That's what happened. If you want to argue with somebody about that, you have to argue with the Lord because he made the choice. I didn't. I'm just merely telling you about it. So that's who you have to argue with and fuss over that, which I don't recommend you do it too well because I have fuss with the Lord and you always win. So, but if you want to do that, you want to put some energy in it, go ahead. We go now back into Matthew And we began to do our commentary on the text. And it says it's the book of the generation of Jesus Christ. And let me deal with that word Jesus a minute. No, what did you do? You stretched out in the bathtub. Yeah. What you did? You had a line at the bathroom door. When you coming out of there? But when we finally got in a house where there was a shower, whew, that was a whole new experience. Now, once you get out the tin tub, you don't go back to the tin tub. You might remember the tin tub. You may even have some fond memories of the tin tub sitting before the pot-bellied stove on a Saturday night there. You have fond memories of that and listening to the radio and all that. However, every chance you get, you running into the shower. You run you a nice bath in a nice bathtub, don't you? With a little bubble bath and a little stuff in there you put in there. Well, so that is the way it is with our knowledge now. Once we were in the tin tub, we went to the tub, now we're in the shower. Now we're in the whole pool, the whole swimming pool of the world. Knowledge is all around us. All right. Well, I think I'm through with the Adam and Eve story, and I think you see some of the foolishness of man included in this story, and that the people writing it at that time had what was called, or was suffering from misogynism, that is, a hatred of women, or fear of the female principle. But the woman did not bring sin in the world. If anybody brought it in here, we both brought it in here, and obviously somebody brought something, because
over their head when they pray. Right. And that's why when you see sketches and etchings of the black church on the plantation, you'll see a bucket sitting there by the altar. Sitting right there by the Mona's bench is a bucket. Because you cannot stop us from shouting and singing. When we feel the goodness of the Lord and our ancestors and others, we're going to shout. You cannot stop that in black people. And so they had to put that bucket over their head. So when they couldn't, you had a preacher, they couldn't sing the songs, and they couldn't pray. And that's where that song came from. Way down yonder by myself, and I couldn't hear nobody pray. See, that's what that song meant. I couldn't hear nobody pray. Because they were used to hearing each other pray and getting the message back and forth. That's a precious song. That's right. Way down yonder by myself. I couldn't hear nobody pray. Then somebody said, well, what are we going to do? The preacher can't carry the message. We can't sing the song. We can't pray out loud. That James Weldon Johnson tried to capture in his book, God's Trombone, like the preaching of them preachers on that plantation. I mean, I don't think there's anybody, and we've had some fine preachers in our day that could match them. And they could go from plantation to plantation, and in the sermon, it gave instructions to where to meet and gather for the slave revolts and for the slave escape. See, there was a lot more slave revolts than what we know about. Right. They would not let you know that. They wouldn't let it go from plantation to plantation because they didn't want the word to get around. But the Nat Turner revolt was so dynamic you couldn't escape it. The Gabriel Prosser and Nimrod Vesey was so dynamic you couldn't get around that, so that became public.
And I want to give honor and praise and mention to all those who paid the supreme price for our freedom as a people, as Jesus has said. Greater love has no man than he lay down his life for a friend. And that's the supreme sacrifice. Even people that you may not agree with on one point or another, if they stand up and give their life for him, I mean, there's no argument there. If their commitment was in question at any point, once they give up the supreme sacrifice, there's no question to the level of their commitment. So I say there are those who were not in agreement. I wasn't in agreement with Dr. King's nonviolent method. However, I love Dr. King, and I never questioned his love for us and his level of commitment. And if I have difficult, we're so far removed from them, and they're very ancient. If you keep working with them, there's something inside of you that makes contact with them, and it brings about a change in your whole scope of life. And that's what we need, a change of scope. The reason why we are confined to these ghettos and slums is because we have been made to think on that level. Once we expand our scope, when our scope was large, we weren't on that level. We could build those gargantuan statuary and pyramids, and not only in Africa, anywhere you go in the first place. That's right. How did you get it? You understand what I'm saying? So you're going to tell a person it's a sin before God for them to be in the natural state that God thought them in. Then you are accusing the Creator of doing wrong, of making a mistake by making the people black. All right. Y'all with me? All right. Now Ezekiel had to use some code language there, and as I talked about in one group of Africans who were being controlled by Eurasians, supposed to do. All right, now y'all still. I don't have much long now. Be patient.
Right. Well, hey, you're doing a good job.
The various soils, and that's all you can come up with. Now, they created the concept of the throne and the king, and in their literature, they state very clearly, and I do document it in African Woman, the Original Guardian Angel, that it was the black woman who created the system of governance, who created laws to discipline the community, because the man was perfectly happy running wild in the woods, chasing after lions or elephant, whatever he was chasing. Now, he was happy-go-lucky. It was the woman who made him domestic. It was the woman who planted the crops so that he stopped running and chasing food and could sit down and eat some food. He could take time to do something else behind chase food and fill his stomach. It was the woman who set that situation up. Therefore, she put him on
system of belief for a control mechanism. And now here's another thing I want to make clear to you. The white man did not want the slave to read the Bible. So this statement you hear brothers and sisters say, we had the land, the white man had the Bible, now he has the land and we have the Bible. That may be true, and it is true, because it did switch around. He did take the land, however, he didn't come in with the intent of you reading the Bible. He read it to you and interpreted it for you. Because when a slave was caught reading the Bible, a slave was killed in those days. Because they didn't want, and especially after Nat Turner, Gabriel Prosser, Denmark Vesey, and all those folk who had read the Bible and read about the Battle of Jericho and all that kind of stuff, and that they fought for their freedom and liberation, they led slave revolts. So they did not want you to read or have it. So, because whenever you read it, one was superior to the other. They had different basic functions in the society. And they had to know how to do that. Only a woman can teach a girl how to be a woman. Only a man can teach a boy how to be a man. Then they bring them back together and they intermingle those, and that they relate to each other. That's why we don't relate to each other. We don't know nothing about being men and women. We think when our sexual genitals get stimulated, we're men and women. That's not true. We haven't been prepared for adulthood at all. It's thrust upon us, the whole responsibility of it. And that's why most of us crumble under the weight of it. In a proper African society, a man would never run off and leave his family, because he was taught from the beginning to take care of his family. But even if he left, the family wouldn't fall apart, because the women were self-sufficient, because they control the economy in the society. In all African societies before Islam and everything else came, women control the society. Now, one of the aspects of being able to prove to the elders to pass the test, because if you never passed the test, you were never accepted as an adult. You could be 50 years old, but if you never followed the values that an adult and the way an adult's supposed to act, you were still considered a child in that village. You didn't become an elder simply because you grew some gray hair. You became an elder because you followed through a certain cycle and certain procedure of life and process of life. One of the main determining factors to let you know that you had now crossed over from childhood to adulthood was your ability to interact and share with others. That was so important. Why? Because when a child is born, What does a child think about? What is a child? What's that, my sister?
I just want to say
When they went into battle, they wore a black cape, were buck naked, and the first person that they fell upon in battle, they bit them and drew blood from them. This is the way it has ever been, this is the only way it's ever going to be, and this is the way you have to deal with it. So we have to clear that up and talk about when it was written and by what name it was known, all right? It was put together in its present form many years. How many? What? Many years. After the death of the Hebrew patriarch Moses. Now we'll discuss that in a minute, why Moses is important here in talking about the book of Genesis. But it wasn't put together while he was alive. It was put together many years after his death. Now here's a clue that we're going to get into. I got to get Carlton Heston and Elizabeth Taylor and all them people out your head, out of your head. So I got to set right who these people were. And we have other proof for it, but if you need, the Bible right there told you that Canaan was a son of Ham, which means he was one of us, which no question. Now, he settles there in about 1650. But the story about Abraham settling in Canaan was written long after the death of Moses, or put together after the death of Moses, and when the Canaanite was no longer in the land. Right. The people who were in the land when he got there in 1650, by the time the story was written, were no longer there. Is that clear? To translate it into the Greek, they did not have enough words in the Greek language to make an accurate translation. So they had to use what was available, because the Hebrew language, the Kemetan language, the Akkadian language, the Aramaic language, the language of India, the Himyaritic of Arabia, all those languages were millennia older than the Greeks. Theirs was a very young language. Okay, let me get back to the document. We're going to have question and answer, because y'all will get me out there. I won't get back. Let me get, especially you, Reverend. All right, so its most famous name is the tradition, however, did not arise until a comparatively late period. That's what we want to do with. They didn't start doing that. They didn't even do that while Moses was alive. Moses was to come back from the grave now and say, Moses, we got these 5 books you wrote. He said, what you talking about? I ain't writing no 5. What 5 books? In ancient history, why do you think that is? Because black people went everywhere. So every language in the world has something to the level of a beast. Go ahead, sister. Reduce you to the level of a beast. Then that person's a devil. Now, you don't have to accept my...
And I must say...
Yes, my brother.
The white man comes on the scene with the 4 Ds, as I say.
Let me finish with the brain a minute.
He comes with destruction, he comes with disease, domination, and finally death. Everywhere he is touching...
That's what his history says.
All of them as our people white.
That's his history. Now, we're getting back to this brain. My sister, I'm going to get with the brain now. When you are hold on a minute, let me deal with the brain. When you are dissected from the spiritual principles, see, you're looking at
Sante Sana, my son, this is my spiritual son, Jehudi El Malik Aman Ra. And the hunter-gatherer stage, going shopping for groceries was a very dangerous business. You could be groceries, or you could get groceries. It was a toss-up. Depending upon what mood the lion was in when you got there. If the lion was hungrier than you probably end up being the groceries. But if not, you might bag the lion and bring him home. Well, now, there's a lot of hazard involved in that occupation. And so for a woman to see her man go out and her sons go out every day and not know if they're going to come back or not from the shopping mall, she said, I got to come up with something to minimize the cost or the risk involved in survival, in the survival game. I have to take the survival game to another level. I have to evolve it heavy and profound that these things, we may never know them all in this lifetime. That's how you're talking about an empire that lasted 18,000 years. And just constantly developing and creating these scientific symbols. They didn't bow down and worship these things. These were symbols of natural forces. In African Genesis 2, entitled, in the beginning was African Genesis 2, Black Gods in the Land of Eden, I trace many of these gods and goddesses back to the original African kings and queens they were named after. These were people who actually lived, who represented certain principles of life and natural phenomena, demonstrated in what they did for the people. Now, looking at this picture done by Brother Mentu Teggett, it's a favor, we keep it hanging in our living room. And it's a blessing just to look upon. Here now is Osset with the throne on her head. Why does she have a throne on her head? Because the throne represented the lap of your mother. Why? Because it was the woman who is
this finance, and we really appreciate it. Every time you spend money on this kind of material, it goes a long ways. Actually, you're not spending money, you're investing money, because it does go a long ways. And you know, I don't have to tell you how African scholars have to struggle along, and Negroes with the money. You all know Roy Canton and his work here. Please stand up, Roy. Every time somebody get in trouble, the first person there with help is Roy Canton. The first person to say, let's help. And he was one of the founders of the Africans Helping Africans. The moment, and I was the one that got in trouble to get it. Roy said, hold it, we're going to do something about this. And of course, one of our great living Kandakis. Kandaki means queen mother of the ancient Kushite empire. Kandaki and warrior queens. Such a warrior, sometimes the brothers have to gather around her and hold her hand still because she slings the sword everywhere. She has a double two-edged sword together. And at the heart and center of it was what was to become, and is still now, the richest mineral continent on earth. It not only had the richest minerals, but it also had enough food to sustain the whole entire world before invaders came and redirected the energies and caused deserts and other things to well up there, and swamps and things of that nature. We had a true paradise there. And that in that paradise is where humanity began. Before the Creator brought about humanity, it was made certain that what would be needed to sustain everybody on the planet that would be born on this planet would be found in Mother Africa. And as long as Mother Africa was undisturbed by demonic forces, she was able to do that. In her, a jawbone, the same type of jawbone in India in 1932. But when he presented it to the Society of the Scientists there, they only wanted to accept bones that had been found in Europe. Or they might accept those found in China, but they didn't want to accept those found in a land where the people indigenous to that land had been black. And where he found it, the people were at that time still indigenous to that land were black in the Silverlock Hills of India. Sometime later in 1960, about the same time, a song by the Beatles called Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which was definitely a drug-inspired piece. And while they're high, that's when they decide to name it Lucy. But the Afar tribesmen said, no, ain't no Lucy here. This is Dinkanesh. They said, what? Yeah, this is Dinkanesh. What is that? It means you are wonderful. So the proper name, you keep hearing about Lucy and Lucy. This is Dinkanesh. 3.5 million West Turkana Lake. And it is the most famous Homo erectus fossil skeleton to date. It is a young boy, about 12, right, because she takes it over, and for 40 weeks of gestation, she holds on to it and she develops it. We can't do that. That's why she's the replica of the universe. Only the female body can do that. And the black female body was the first body to do that and the most prolific to do that and produce that. But it shows our role in it in shaping the egg. Also, it explains the fact that we understood the relativity of all things in life scientifically. That is, the celestial and the terrestrial were a mirror, one of the other. That what was happening in the cosmos and the universe also was on Earth. There's nothing that happens in the whole entire universe that does not take place on Earth in some form or fashion. In fact, the whole thing that happens in the universe also takes place
in you. You couldn't stand it. You couldn't stand injustice. You couldn't stand unrighteousness. You'd have to fight. You couldn't do anything about it. It'd be like fire, like Jeremiah said, fire, shut up in my mouth. Then you'd have to move. So we are not connected with the Creator. Let's deal with that. The Creator has been merciful and answered some prayers because He loves us. She loves us. But we ain't in contact, because if we were in direct contact, we would overthrow this puny nothing, as Dr. Satnek calls it, mass of protoplasm, that underdeveloped mass of protoplasm. We overthrow this bone. In a minute. Black man knew his Creator. He would never be afraid of anybody or anything. And they understand that they're Africans first and Muslims second. I know some fine Christians who understand that they're African first and Christian second. All right. Johnny Youngblood understands that he's an African. Yeah. Khalid Muhammad knows that he's an African first. And a Muslim second. Eric Muhammad. All right. And they will jump up and try to defend. We'll go and visit these lands in the Sudan where they're doing all this dirty stuff, committing sodomy on black men every day, raping black women every day. They come back and say, well, our Islamic brothers. Oh my God. If you put Islam over us, if you put Jesus over us, if you put Moses over us, if you put anything over us, you are our enemy. Until you get that straightened out, that's what you are. Now, we'll try to reach out to you. We'll try to help heal you because we love you. You're our family. But we are not going to trust you. Because we can't. Because your allegiance is not to us.
Covering 5 holidays: Misgiving Day, Xmas, the 4th of July, Halloween, and Columbus Day. So all 5 of those are on there. And I don't believe I left any thing out, but if I educated, and I use that word understanding what I'm talking about. I use that word as it is used in this language, the Latin root educa, meaning to bring out the best in someone. You have to be the most educated Africans, among the most educated Africans on this planet. Everybody in here at least has the equivalency of a PhD. If we were to put you to the test with all this information that stands before you, if we were to put you to the test and have them work on their doctoral dissertation, I'm sure I'd get at least one for each one of you up in here with all this information now. So you're very privileged, and it's always an honor to be in your midst, and you have to know what you're talking about when you come on. Lived in the land that he lived in Galilee at that time, in the little nation of Judea in that day. And I'm sure we will be discussing that as well. You all right? Now, we're going to break it down. This is actually part 2 that I didn't get to finish of Will the Real Jesus Please Stand Up? And I may have to come back and do a part 3 one day, Alton, because I don't think I'm going to finish everything today. I always have more material than I can get through. You understand anything about that, Brother Jeffries? Dr. Felder, you know anything about that? Always have more than I can get through. But we're going to do the best we can here tonight. I'm going to do it in several sections. The first section I want to address is Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's article, some excerpts from that, and we'll do a little discussion on that. The concept and man logic circuit securely implanted. Good Lord. Check that out. Let me read that one more time. She said, with this unconscious, God is a white man logic circuit securely implanted. That means they have done a surgical job on your mind by misusing your spirituality and coming at you with religion and took your spirituality or much of your spiritual identity from you. If I don't hold on to that, I'm going to lose my faith in God. That should say something to you right there. If your faith in God is predicated on a doctrine rather than your actual spiritual relationship, now you really got to re-examine that. I hope you know this type of thing is very important to us now because the changing of the guard is at hand. White boy's power is going down. He's scrambling hard. Crucified as a what? That's what the record says. That's what it says. And even the New Testament tells you that. That was the charge brought against him. What was the charge? I watched that cracker sit there with a grin on his face. And he grinned through that whole message. And then I pulled my Bible up from under there. And I opened it up and I went to work on each one of them texts. And he shot out that door. Because you know where you can explain that. You tell me that Jesus was in, now what does the Christian doctrine say? I'm about to come to a close, but I'm going to ask you this. What does it say? How long was he in the ground? 3 days and what? Is that what it says? The New Testament says that by the 12th hour, which is 6 o'clock, they had to take him off the cross because they couldn't leave him up there for Passover. And the 15th and the 16th century. There. And others have looked at it. He looked out over the sea. He said, if we can navigate the Niger, he was the emperor of the Mali Empire at that time. He said, if we can navigate the Sahara Desert, we can deal with that Ethiopian sea out there. So he went to work building. He went to work building with a knowledge which had been preserved by the University of Sankore at Timbuktu and other university systems right there in the motherland. And he sent out 200 ships, 100 with crews of Africans. They had established a tropical paradise with 5 women to each man.
they had quarreled and murdered one another, and nearly all the rest had been killed by the outraged Indians. Now the brothers had opened up their arms and said, come on in, there's plenty, you know. We'll share. These folk acted so bad they made the Bloods mad there, and they started killing them, which was their right to do. They said they should have slain them at the bay in the first place. I'm not talking violence, I'm not talking hatred, I'm talking our survival. He goes on to write, he turned back towards Haiti October. He left another colony there now, and he went on to explore some other islands, right? He looked for some other islands to explore, because up until this time he hadn't found really anything to take home but those 10 indigeni there, which they called Indians there. And Isabella and Ferdinand said, you better come up with something more than that, because we got to pay this $98,000 back to them Jews. So you better come up with something. That ain't gonna get it. He turned back towards Haiti October the 29th, 1494, wondering how his new settlement had fared. He was shocked to find that it had behaved like its predecessor, that the Spaniards had raped native women, stolen native stores of food, and kidnapped native boys to serve as slaves, and that the natives had killed many Spaniards in revenge. Columbus himself now became a slave dealer. Let me read that again. Listen very carefully to this. Written by Will Durant, Dr. Will Durant, one of the foremost European historians. In The Story of Civilization, Volume 6, page 265. If you don't have it, go to the library and check it out for yourself. Columbus himself now became a slaveholder. He sent out expeditions to capture 1,500 natives. 400 of these he gave to settlers, 500 he dispatched to Spain, 200 of these died on the voyages. The survivors were sold at Seville, but died in a few years, unable to adjust themselves to the colder climate or perhaps to the savagery of civilization. Under Moses, he messed that up. In some places, December the 25th. And it was the birthday of the shot that was heard around the world. I'll be finishing in a minute. The shot. But when I studied it, went into it historically and found out what it was all about, that was based in the Satanism practices, once again, of the Druids and all that. Now, I don't have time to go on that tonight, but I do discuss it in the book. There were several questions that came up, and one was, first of all, it is not the birthday of Jesus. First of all, it is into what he can get you materially from this white man. Look at that.
The one thing that he did know, he knew how to catalog the categories of Africans brought into the Americas and in the Caribbean, and that whose supply line is so thin, is so far away from home, they're in a poor position to defend themselves. But a comparatively little people, little numerically, but shrewd in the colonial game, and one of the most ruthless slave traders in the business of the Dutch. They would dress and parade their concubine mistresses, mixed breeds, even sent to Paris with special dress for them. There was a whole octoroon society. This is the origin of the Louisiana Creole. A subject not worth a great deal here and now, but it was a separate society, so separate from blacks. It was a long time, even up to the present, men wouldn't go to school with blacks and couldn't go to school with whites. They would dress and parade their concubine mistresses, mixed breeds, even sent to Paris with special dress for them. There was a whole octoroon society. This is the origin of the Louisiana Creole. A subject not worth a great deal here and now, but it was a separate society, so separate from blacks. It was a long time, even up to the present, men wouldn't go to school with blacks and couldn't go to school with whites. It presented an educational dilemma for the school system. Now, what we are dealing with now, additional money he will need to purchase his freedom. So now you've got Caribbean free men, Black American free men. In South America, you've got free men, the relatives of the black woman who's married to Portuguese, and the church agreed that once she married to Portuguese, she is free. And some of her relatives became free, used as later on, not because anybody loves anybody. It's going to come because it's going to reach a saturation point. It's going to reach a point where everybody's going to have one who wanted one, could afford one, and then the village will start the campaign to get rid of the traffic at sea. Then because African men and African women stood up and opposed that system for over 100 years physically. LaRon Bennett's book, Pioneers of Protest, is a very good portrait of Prince Hall. There's a new book on it by Charles Wesley, but it's hard to get, and some of my academic friends visit my house, and I don't know what kind of pockets they got, but the book left with one of them. I told Charles Wesley's wife, Dr. Porter, who happens to be a very good friend of mine, has gotten a second copy. I just hid that one. So when they come, that one is under something. But there is a good book on there's Peter Ogden from Antigua who started the Odd Fellows.
They had already established certain enclaves in Asia, even on the shores of India. And the Portuguese, seeing the Spaniards getting a large hump of land, and feeling themselves out of things, a little too much out of it, and not too clear about the lines of demarcation laid down by the poet when he had said, if you take the East and you take the West and you two good Catholic nations start to exploit. Now, the period of Haiti is over. It's now called Haiti. It was originally called Hispaniola. The Hispaniola period is over. Father de las Casas has lived and died now. Father de las Casas came over on the third ship of Christopher Columbus. When Christopher Columbus discovered through diseases and exploitation and brooding, the Indians were dying in such wholesale manner that they had even killed our labor supply. He went to Father de las Casas and proposed the enslavement
increase the enslavement of the African in order to save the souls of the Indians. Father de las Casas agreed and went to the Pope to get permission for the increase.
Thank you very much. He caught a bullet and got into his world's great accidental hero. All right. Because white people say so many bad things about us, it's not true. Have access to ammunition from Europe, other European nations, and did not have sympathy from other European nations, themselves slaveholders. Remember now, during the American Revolution, Lafayette came from France. Laflante, the French architect, came later to design the city of Washington, left in a huff, and a brilliant black mathematician who was looking over his, well, she saved Washington's life, and when some major tried to play up to her romantically to cover up the secret of the attempt to poison Washington, she wouldn't buy that angle. All right. Now, the second year of the war, Washington began to accept blacks in the army. And they began to distinguish themselves in a number of the battles in the American Revolution. A woman, Deborah Gannett, disguised as a man and fought in the American Revolution. James Varick would challenge the white church, and they would find the AME. Now the independent black church is on the way. You've got independent thinkers now. And we are approaching the 1800s. And as we approach the 1800s, we have the semblance of a church organization, the semblance of literary organization. David Walker, owning a second-hand clothing store where many of the sailors would come and pawn their winter clothes in the fall or in the spring and pick them up in the fall. When he wrote his appeal, he would put a copy in the pockets of these sailors. And this is how the appeal got to England. Someone opened a copy and took it to a man and said, if you whites want to give blacks free trips back to Africa, between two men who did not believe and said publicly, repeatedly, they did not believe that the slave would ever be the social equal of other people, that he would ever fit into the society. And the person who said it best and said it more often was Abraham Lincoln. Now, on the eve of this catastrophe
some smart Missouri lawyers decided to put to task the escape slave law.
One thing the Caribbean people and the African people never appreciated is that the black American had to deal with absolutely the worst white people ever. They had to deal with the worst that Europe could offer, the leftovers, the discards of Europe, and we're still dealing with the discards. These people just don't think. They don't make no kind of sense. What they're doing, they don't make no kind of, you can't figure them out no kind of way. They're even against each other. All right, now, as Africa faced the beginning of this century, let's take it from the top. Let's look at North Africa. And he had come to do just that. But then he said that he do not want to harm innocent people. And if the British would turn over so much ammunition to him, so much this and so many harms to him, he might consent to spare the city. The British gave him enough ammunition to fight them 3 more years. They never laid eyes on him. He fought until the 20s, after the First World War. Winston Churchill suggested that we put some airplanes on some ships and bomb his inland fortresses. And they bombed his inland fortresses. He retreated into Ethiopia, and he tried to proposition Haile Selassie's alleged father, Ras McConnell. And I won't get into the lineage of Haile Selassie. He was just as true as many other people sit on the throne, although there's some question about his parentage. He wasn't a McConnell. Because, well, I've seen Haile Selassie. He went into the Congo and fought with another general called Tam Tam Anna. His assistant, another Ghanaian teacher named Joseph D. never called it religion, but spirituality. Universal spirit. During the ceremony, he is instantaneously tried and probably instantaneously killed. It's the most sacred object of this anti-people. See, Christian Western people think there's nothing sacred to anybody except them. This is their Ark of the Covenant. The forerunner. This is the forerunner of what became Christianity.
Won't open the door, leaving them with no other door to come into but their mother's people's door. And yet, so many times they have no loyalty. There is an essential myth through the life of most of the people in the world. Now, with interpretation of the curricula as a feel-good curricula, the criticizers of our desire for a correct curricula have had nothing but a feel-good curriculum. But they don't want anyone else in the world that bought in. While they will split up the rest of Africa, but all those got a little muscle. The Germans got a big slice. The Germans got 4 nice pieces. Southwest Africa, now Namibia, the Cameroons, Togoland, now Togo, and Tanzania. They began almost a rehearsal for Nazism in Africa, because the civilian governor of Southwest Africa was Jewish. The military governor was Herman Gary's father. No. If I didn't know what the documents, I wouldn't be saying it. Failure to acknowledge that every American citizen is a citizen. If you're a citizen, you need no civil rights movement and no civil rights action. The fact that you need it proves that they have not acknowledged you as a citizen. In a nation of immigrants, we are the immigrants against our will. We are the only immigrants, and the many thousands gone who put it on the line for our freedom and lost it. With our collective selves, let us settle the differences between us and let them know they did not do it in vain.
All right. Professor John Henry Clark. Professor John Henry Clark.
Regardless of color and ethnic background, you got to face it. And that means you got to appropriately argue how the bringing to a close white supremacy and oppression of And this goal of bringing white power to a close begins to set the curriculum of African-centered education. Understand? And that's why you're going to study war as a part of your African-centered education. That's why you study the development of power as a part of African-centered education, and the preservation of power and the organization of power, because you need power to overcome your enemies and to achieve your liberation. We must come to know intimately the organization.
We began to challenge the norm. We began to make changes and innovations in society that ultimately will change all society. Now, during the dynastic period in Egypt, the first dynasty, impressive with Nomar or Minos. The second, kind of a holding dynasty, housekeeping dynasty. I mean, they did not move backward or forward. The third dynasty, we would produce not only a great radical, but the world's first multi-genius who would make radical changes in the society itself. Imhotep, builder of the step pyramid. Doctor, the world's first physician. No one had ever done that. Okay, my main point is that this kind of radicalism guided Africa through the first and second golden age, and that Akhenaten came close to the end of the first golden age, and that the recovery of independence and the 1,000 years of peace and prosperity brought Africa another golden age, and that golden age did not end until foreigners came again. You must remember that Africa existed for thousands of years before any invasion. That the first invasion was 1675 BC. My main point is that was set in motion a series of revolutions. Ministers telling the African to compromise. The African, the mangled body of his father,
thrown on the poor. Some of the work filtered down to the lower classes. Building the ships, purification of the sugar, sorting the tobacco. So the slave system had began to reconstruct and rescue the economy of Europe. There are certain things that come down through us, through time and history. And sometimes
the African image favorably, which is set up with agreements between Morocco, the Empire of Morocco, and the English. So these alliances exist, and the shared attitude is once the Protestant faith starts to emerge in different parts of Europe. And they again resorted to whatever means necessary to subdue those who they saw as a threat, those who they saw as heretics, those who they saw as a danger to the maintaining the power of the church. That's the Spanish Inquisition, basically, and it functions from about the 15th, of course, coming from Saudi Arabia, sold Africans, sold Europeans, and sold each other. Every people have engaged in the enslavement of other people for the purpose of profit. Greed goes across ethnic and cultural lines. Insensitivity goes across ethnic and cultural lines. It didn't make any difference. If you were, even the Bible talks about somebody's brother being sold into Joseph, right? So the idea of slavery we seem to assume this was something new. Slavery is as old as dirt, in terms of, she's as old as man, probably, in terms of someone deciding that they're going to
along the coast, pick up all the goods and trade along the coast and collapse the economy from the inside.
Right.
And so then you get more chaos.
Exactly.
In the interior of Africa. Okay, please continue, because I hadn't quite saw that.
Yeah. And then what also, of course, happens is, as the chaos increases, what are Europeans increasingly requesting? Because they need labor. They're requesting captives. You want certain goods? Give us some people. So now Africa people around this notion of one God, and God sends prophets. That's really not different from a lot of other traditional African faiths. The Yoruba talk about Olodumare as one God, and yet there are different orishas or gods, mini-gods, if you will, that exist within it. The problem is that most people were not looking at the cosmological links or the parallels. They were simply manifesting a very simple...
To sell his brother into slavery. And after continuing to try to get him to answer the question, because he never...
in the actual system of slavery and making the agricultural the agriculture that they're engaged in more productive through the slave labor. So they're saying we're going to get our wealth by having the maximum number of slaves in a particular area produce the maximum amount of crops to increase our wealth and keep our overhead low by giving them just enough to survive. See, so the focus with the English is on making the business of slavery, the actual production aspect, more fruitful, more productive. That's different, like I said, than what the Spanish focus had been initially. And that's why the Spanish actually get a little bit of...
deeper insight into the impact that the Moors had on Europe. Dr. Bay, if you would begin.
Are speaking Arabic, they wear the attire, and they are seen as sending mixed messages to, again, the average Catholic citizen, if you will. it's seen as a great danger by those in power. If you then go over to Italy, you have schools like the University of Bologna and the medical school at Salerno, which emphasize a great deal of the scholarship of the Moors. Specifically, the University of Naples and Bologna were both established to focus on that. That was their purpose. This is a shift from what were formerly referred to as cathedral schools, which basically just taught people how to be clerics, because they didn't believe as the Catholic authorities believed. This is where the saying, if you've ever heard it, comes from. One of the envoys, or one of the agents of the Pope came in and told him, we've initiated this attack against the Cathars, but, some of the people are innocent. Meaning we launched this attack, but we don't know who is who when we burn and raze these cities, these villages. And the Pope is reported to have said, kill them all. God knows his own. Which essentially doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because then it's innocent people who are being slain in the process. But that kind of fervor, that kind of zealous, justifiable fervor, saying, look, just kill them all, I ain't got time. We don't have time nor an interest in figuring out who's innocent and who's not innocent. Just kill them all and let God deal with it. That attack, which occurs against using the resources that the Moors had given them. But the Moors invade from northwest Africa, and Alfonso X is one of the Catholic monarchs who recognizes that if we as Catholics, but this young man said Slavic peoples too. So I'm saying that this is really getting interesting out here in terms of how the structure is changing. But then I also started to think to myself, I wonder how much this idiot knows about his own history. Because for me, my rationale for deciding to study the Moorish legacy and Moorish history was because I always felt that the best way to silence most Europeans, so-called white folks, was to hit them in the bloodline. Texts would show the coats of arms, the symbols of European families, and in it you find you. It's obvious that they're saying there was a time when we wanted to show you off as part of the family. We wanted to show you off so much that we put it in books which would be passed down for posterity. We have coats of arms hanging up in our homes showing you, African man and African woman, Asiatic. They're letting you know the way things used to be. They're not afraid to say it. Morrison, son of a Moor, Morris. In fact, I just say a dear friend of mine passed away yesterday morning. His name was Louis John Morris, also known. Nubians and the Egyptians were fighting each other. I said, because they fought each other didn't mean they were related. I mean that they weren't related. See, you're trying to take this issue of conflict and make it racial. We can disagree. I can disagree with my brother, but it doesn't mean my brother's no longer related to me. So when we consider that, I had to say a little bit about that teacher by the name of Adam de Marisco, who taught mathematics and astronomy. Now, if you see his name, on the faculty registry for Oxford, and you don't know what de Marisco means, there's an Englishman teaching at the Oxford. Oh, that is a strange name. But his name means Adam of the Moors. And it would not be unusual, of course, to find him teaching mathematics or astronomy in the 13th century. On board the ship were people that spoke Arabic, Chaldean, and Hebrew. Nationals, right? Think about it. A white was a recognized national. Irish, English, German, Spanish, Italian. If you had a nation and you carried the accoutrements of that nation, whether it be your name, your custom, your language, that's who you were. So it was understood that these folks are white because they're linked to a nation. But black was used to refer to someone whose condition was that of servitude. So what was the brother trying to say? He was trying to say that if one identifies with these terms, they're giving Europeans a legal excuse to treat folks as outcasts, or as aliens, or as slaves.
The way we are treated. Can you speak about the importance of imagery to mind control
of life? And so we need our whole learning processes need to be turned upside right. And we've got to think this thing through in terms of what we really want to have on the planet as learning. Mm-hmm. We're not getting learning now. Mm-hmm. And we're not getting the type of learning and the type of transmission of knowledge that creates the internal dynamic to produce the superhuman. Mm-hmm. Not in the sense of the Nazis producing a Superman to dominate others, but to manifest the fullness of self and the achievement of self. There has to be an understanding of what happens inside. So one of the common things we talk about is garbage in means garbage out. Mm-hmm. So your universe and the cosmos produces the astronomy and astrology that allows you to see the larger universe that you're a part of, and allows you to create a dimension of you beyond you, that you are part of a greater being. And so the concept of the God within and the God without becomes the force within and the force without, or you began to see the creation in its fullest dimensions and began to relate it. So philosophy is developed in relationship to this universe that you're part of. And of course, the relationship of as individuals produces the science of living as family. Mm-hmm. So all of the basic ingredients that we're talking about to make for the larger life of the human family were found among African peoples and then shared by others. Mm-hmm. But the great tragedy is, as you look at the flow of knowledge, and I again use the pyramid of formulation, we are only allowed to learn
has never been more crucial for the development of the African to resist the ultraviolet rays of the sun. And the human family is a part of the mammal family. And so clearly, if humankind existed for any length of time, back into antiquity, for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, has never of enormous conflict that we have to be prepared to struggle around. Those 10 areas are, number one, that we're dealing with an African origin of humankind. And when we're talking about an African origin, there is a great wealth of scientific material that has been presented, particularly over the last 20 years and particularly over the last 10, cementing for all who wish to know the truth that Africa is the origin of humankind and Africans are the origin of that humanity. So if we're going to say, for example, as scholars are now saying, that there is no such thing as multiple races of humankind, I agree. As the number one in the areas of conflict is the African origin, and we have to go back millions of years. Number two is the African evolution of society. And when we're talking about the African evolution, we're talking about that last 100,000 years of human development, where there was this rapid, almost revolutionary change, where humankind and the large brain African began to grasp the significance of the laws of nature and began to develop cultures and civilizations around those laws of nature, began to domesticate animals, domesticate plants, began to live in settled communities, as Dr. Diop says in his great book, Civilization and Barbarism. During this period of time, that evolution of humanity took place in Africa around the concept of incest taboo. The Africans somehow, in studying the laws of nature, finding that if you married into a bloodline of the same bloodline, that there were problems. So the Africans developed the concept of developments in Egypt. The saret, symbolizing the kingship, the symbol of the palace, the white crown, the symbol of rulership, the royal barges, etc. So that, and symbols that later became the hieroglyphs. So obviously, Nubia is the mother of Egypt. So when Dr. Ben wants us to understand this, he talks about the development in Egypt as the zenith. This European emerges, and the value system that comes out of it is European materialism. I refer to it as European greed, domination, male orientation. Whereas the African value system is based upon the harmony of opposites, the complementarity of the male and the female principle, the centrality of the female principle because the female produces life. So you have this value system of harmony in conflict with this value system of domination. And the two, in conflict with each other, produce a synthesis. So you have to see this. The Europeans of the ice lead the third process, the African cradle of civilization, and that particular ecology of the Nile is our reality. But of course, the European says that we have no history, we have no culture, and the history of the world to reflect the African truth. Great. Almanac, and Thomas Jefferson still poo-pooed this African achievement. But eventually, what goes around comes around. And Thomas Jefferson was forced eventually to pay homage to Benjamin Banneker, because it was Banneker who, and this is a comic book which deals with this episode in history, which is very significant. It was Benjamin Banneker who was part of the team of people that the Americans had commissioned to lay the foundations for a new capital. They were attempting to build a new Jerusalem in the New World, and they commissioned a French architect, L'Enfant, to outline the plan.
First time at Masonic Temple, all the way from Valdosta, Georgia. Dr. Malefi Asante. Other people with that record, I don't know. But my own works speak for me. I don't know how many people have mentored people for jobs, but I have 5 of my students right now who are running Black Studies departments. I don't know what other people have done, but my works speak for me. I have tried to help other scholars get published in the Journal of Black Studies, and I have published over 200 black scholars to help them get tenure in the Journal of Black Studies. That's my work. So I don't, and I don't tell this story often. And sometimes I think I should, because people say, well, maybe he didn't do that. Keep their hand in the boiling water longest was telling the truth. I'm telling you, this was what the Europeans were doing. This was their system of how you prove something. And then, of course, they had the oaths. They would give you oaths, and you had to say these oaths without stammering. Because if you stammered, then you were lying. Those were the three measures of proof that they were practicing. They were practicing up to the 1400s. There's nothing like that in Africa. That's ignorant stuff. That has nothing to do with nothing but their own belief. And their belief was a false belief. It was an inauthentic belief. It was fakery, because it was not based on any concrete evidence of facts. And that's why when Marsilio Ficino we want to have us a nuclear family. Don't you put your hand on my child. What you mean, your child? This child has a need. This is our child. This child is in trouble. This is our child. This child has the need. You are a part of me. I have no reality without you. So this idea of the social self is something that is the uniquely African contribution to the whole thing. So you have two dimensions now. And in the book, Know Thyself, has a diagram of it. The lowest dimension is the dimension of the personal, physical self. Me, my, I. But that self is tiny compared to the social self, which makes all of us a self, a personality, a being that transcends our individuality. So we continue to live as long as the community lives. One of the things that we used to do, let me just give another example of this self. I'm talking about those living, those yet unborn, and those who are the ancestors. So the connection with the ancestors is tied into the tribal self. What does that mean? That means that the tribal self constantly reminds us that we don't have the right to claim independence of the history of which we are a part. So don't nobody care that you individually weren't a slave in South Carolina. The tribe was enslaved. So therefore, you were enslaved. You understand? You don't have the right to say, well, I can self. Now, you see, the work of Brother Rashidi and Van Sertima and Chancellor Williams and the great elder who's now an ancestor, John Henry Clark, and all of these brilliant scholars, why is their work so important? They have been engaged in reviving the memory of the ancestors. That's what history is. You see, history in and of itself as a chronicle of events, as dates and location, but reconnecting them with things that are happening. Understanding that these were not just predecessors, these are participants.
You see, the African concept of connection with the ancestors understands that they are still here, working through us, working with us. No, you can't see them. No, they aren't going to send you a letter. No, they aren't going to call you on your cell phone. No, they don't have a beeper. But they are clearly here. Constitutes this community that it's found a new expression in you. So every name reminded that child that that child was in fact connected. Is actually an African derivative of the word saku, which was the concept of spirit. But they have taken psychology and reduced it to behavior. They believe that all you are is how you look. They've reduced the human makeup to some brain work, some hormones, and what your behavior happens to be on any given day. They took away the idea that you are God walking on the planet in the flesh of a human being that gives you the power to do what God can do working through you. And the idea of putting their white face on God was to erase the memory, to wipe away the consciousness of the highest dimension of who you were. Brothers and sisters, I'm through. It has been that way since the origin of black life. That's why it's possible to go back in history and pull out the artifacts and see he was a black man. Because this thing of blackness tends to be permanent in a way that's sort of undeniable and impregnable and impenetrable, and it is certainly blackness in the truest sense. So therefore, when we go back and see the artifacts in Mexico or the artifacts in Kemet or wherever we go, we can see the black face. We can see the black person, because the certainty and the continuity of blackness is undeniable. So if the physical part has not been out of sight, what has been out of sight? I submit to you that there is in the acceptance and the embracing of our blackness, that is, the ability to begin to love again. From way, 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 way back, blackness has been there. In fact, blackness was there when we started. Blackness was there in the 18th dynasty and the not-so-black dynasties. Blackness was there at the mouth of the Nile when civilization began, and when it wasn't. It was there in the Sudan. It was there in Ethiopia. It was there in Mali, Songhai, Timbuktu. It's always been there. The blackness has been that thing that has continued across time. Blackness has been the continuation of what's there. And blackness is the thing that not only ties us all together in a shared consciousness, but it ties us all together with all of those who have ever been black since the time of blackness began. So, look what happened then. When you reject blackness, you reject access to history. You understand? When you reject the black face, when you reject the black skin, when you cannot feel and intend
and with the birth of Homo sapiens sapien 30 to 40,000 years ago. So all human beings have their origin in Africa. Therefore, also human history has its origin in Africa, because all human beings are part of the Black Panther Party rally. It's a historic event because Huey and other members of the Panthers met her at the airport with guns. and this became like national news. I had met with Eldridge Cleaver in my house the previous week, and Eldridge wanted me to take part in this rally. And when Betty spoke, Betty said that the FBI and the CIA had forced Alex Haley to exclude 3 chapters from his book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X. When Alex Haley died, a wealthy African American purchased his manuscript, and lo and behold, there were 3 chapters in that manuscript that did not appear in the autobiography. The social legacy of Malcolm X, the political legacy of Malcolm X. Understanding that we gave birth to humanity, if that's so, and it is, clearly that's agreed by anthropologists, paleontologists, and everyone else, then there can't be any superior or inferior races. If there's a centralization of Africans in world history, then that means that without Africa, there'd be no human race. If there's a centralization of Africans in world history, then we cannot understand the foundation of world civilization and world culture until we understand the mind, the spirit, and the soul of Africa.
We're going to talk about that. I want to come back to that for a moment, but I think it would be important. I'd like to get this out of the way now. And you were defining for me yesterday, or interpreting European philosophy in the sense that there are spiritual.
There's the feminine principle within the masculine. And you have at the same time the female with the beard shaped the way the beard of a dead pharaoh is shaped, indicating that the authority for pharaohship or rulership came from the female. And you see the arm around the female indicating the cooperation of male and female. They're sitting on a slab which is the center of the sky. So it's saying that the masculine and feminine, male and female, are the central principles of Mali, of Songhay, of Zimbabwe, of the great civilizations. We need to understand the foundation people that gave birth to this. In Kemet, the great ethical notion was Ma'at. Harmony, truth, justice, balance, right order. Righteousness, uprightness, regularity, steadfastness. As Dr. Obenga likes to say, reality, genuineness. See, it's much more than harmony, truth, balance, right order, and justice. It's much more. Family systems are the model for how they govern their villages, their cities, and their nations. If you look at the Chinese, their family system, black men lost their jobs between that time. And that same study showed that 720,000 black men were out of the household. There is a direct relationship between the man having a job and him being in the house. Because this is a society that says that if you cannot produce economically, you're not a man. And unfortunately, a lot of sisters believe it, and certainly a lot of brothers do. The fact is, if you want the man back into the house, we got to make him employable. And yeah, he needs skills. He needs to get back in school, all these things. But a key thing is, if there's no place where he can see an economic future for himself, he doesn't have much incentive to do that. And so one of the things we've got to see is this family unit coming from the Twa, spreading throughout
the gathering of, not the gathering of the masters, but the wounded womb, part of the component of what the glutamic acid is, even if it is this radical. And remember, I said before that the brain has its own blood pressure. The blood pressure of the body and the blood pressure of the brain are 2 different things. So when you have a glutamic acid that gets past the sentinels that your hypothalamus is all constantly got on the clock, and this thing gets past or bum rushes the sentinels, you got troubles. And if the brain recognizes one component of that glutamic acid, even in its perverted form, but it's doing damage, it's welcoming this beast into it, just like we did, the natives did here when he landed, we welcomed it in. That was MSG-itis there. Everywhere he went, we welcomed him in. Well, this is what your brain is doing to this substance. What's going on in your restaurant say that 15 to 20% of the population, or at least 50 million people, are sensitive to MSG. Now, if you really look at it, you know that they always trim the fat and they always want to get it to sound good for you. So you got to estimate that it's about 40 or 50% of the population, maybe 60 or 70% of the population that are reacting, but the reactions cannot be codified by the present system that they have now. So you don't know what's happening until they legalize or legitimize your sickness with a fucking name they attach to it. And then they start pimping you for some more money. Now, the hidden names we got already. Now I'm going to go through the ingredients. The ingredients that often contain MSG. Malted barley as a flavor. Anything that says flavors or flavoring, you know what the fuck they put in there, flavors, flavoring, what the hell they putting in there? Modified food starch. Barley meal, MAL.
ME. Do you want to see Kim? When you've gone over the top, you watch your best friend been blown to bits. You yourself have lost all your limbs, waking up in a bed with a fragment of your whole body again. That in those kind of persons, you often give medications that I wish the statue of him is in the British Museum. He has long, kind of straightish white hair, or straight hair, whatever that means. But his features, full nose, big nose, full lips, African face. So those are the kind of, again, the kind of erasures in history that have taken place. And so that to know, yes.
So what I want to do is, there's one of the names of I think melanin that I think that you didn't talk about.
Which one is this? Techniques can they use to release themselves from such a possession? How do they stay focused? So I think there's a lot more that has to be done, and there's a tremendous scholarship, vast in extent, and I often have the desire of wanting to know when I speak to a person who's my patient, knowing there's certain words of power. I wonder why when they walk in some days we can't go no place. Everything, the defenses are up sky high. In certain days it just flows. In certain times you hit on certain things, they can come in and I can feel their presence. And what is so important is to, first of all, to have www.1stbooks.com. So but I wanted to add to that for you this question of 2012. So it is, again, notice how in the erasure of history, you hear about the Olmecs, you hear about the Mayas, but you don't hear about the Olmecs. Who were the Olmecs? What did they have to do in African culture? What was your immediate family, you know? So that lady who was asking you that, without even taking a guess, she probably is a typical resident raised through trying to get her little piece of the cake. And losing sight of the children that she's raising, losing sight of her choice of a mate, she's as Dr. who was also saying, who's going to determine if she becomes an associate or a full professor if she doesn't belong to the right old boy or old girls club?
Different banquet. And we decided we have it at City College, and they decided they would prepare the food.
as a result,
taking place in 2004 to the present. I thought I might want to stay there, so I was able to make arrangements to secure a sabbatical. So I was able to be on the ground for 13 months and see some things, make some better connections. Now it's the place to go. That's the place to
The
live.
question is, what work will you be doing with the TWA?
Yes.
That's with the Batois. I will continue some research that I had begun, and that is looking at their contributions to early African civilization and culture. I had heard somebody speak, I think it was 1978, it was Dr. Yosef Ben something.
A time, this time, because everything on the walls depicted that there would come a time when death would come to them, and it just seemed to me subconsciously that perhaps they wrote all of this on the wall so that when this time comes and their children who would awaken out of a sleep, unknowing their history and their path, that they wrote it there, seal it so that it would last for thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, so that we would be able to then go back and look at and read and understand and disciple out of the sleep, knowing who we are and where we come from. Can we talk about that spirit, what you saw there, some of those things that would give you to understand the spiritual essence of life? You're too afraid of this, afraid you're going to lose your money, afraid you're going to lose your house, afraid of what the neighbors might say about you, afraid that your girlfriend will say that you're a chump because you as a woman are, quotes, loving that man too hard, or that you are a chump, man, because you're doing too much for that woman. Is to be upside down. To be afraid to work a long 10, 12, 14-hour day to bring home something for the family. To be upside down. So these are different aspects of being upside down. There are also examples of people were shown with their heads cut off the body. Right. Heads would just cut off. Showing they just lost their consciousness and totally out of it. Totally unaware. Head was off the body, meaning big head. You lost your head. You lost your consciousness. And it's a way of killing a person. The person was dead. They were dead. Other examples of being in the lake. That would be, you can shoot that from over there.
You want me to start it now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let me put my nose first.
But this is proof of the fact that they knew it needed an adjustment. I think she can give you a little more about the cannabis stuff.
And I'd just like to add something too about the Kamites and astronomy. Some of the very earliest calendars that you see on the temple walls of the rise of the river each year, so that they could control the agricultural system for better production of food.
In other words, there was a passage at the bottom of that 9-meter.
Yes, actually it's a big well or a big hole in the ground, and it has it's measured.
Gradated.
It's gradated, so that and each year they would mark it where the river rose. That particular year it was marked, so the record was kept continuously, actually for thousands of years.
Did that have any relationship or input into the development of the calendar?
When you attempt to build that pyramid, you need thousands of people. Well, how can you call all these people together at the same time simultaneously if you don't know what time it is? You see? So the calendar regulated time, that is to say when the work crews should be there. The calendar regulated cooking, because when you're trying to cook for 10, 15,000 people at one time, you see, you must have this thing efficiently under control. Who's cooking the vegetables, who's cooking the meat, who has the wine and so forth. That has to be all organized. Imagine a gigantic catering party, if you will. Right? So the calendar had to regulate that. Also, some of the granite stones that they used on this pyramid, some weigh as much as 5 tons. And the granary was several miles, away. So the only way they could get it, and not the only way, but one of the ways they did it was by going along the river. But the river did things that are still defining the world. Everybody uses that calendar, you see. And then we could, you could take it a little further. I invented the best calendar that could possibly be made. But the base of it is that calendar right there.
Let's take a look at that calendar. And let's talk about it. Let's talk about how it came about. Can you hold it up and get some close-ups of it?
Can you see it? Is it too much glare? This is in the mother said, well, I don't know how to do that. Ask your father. He said, well, I don't know that either. So he begins to build up a picture. African peoples don't know mathematics and science and physics. I'm an African child, therefore I shouldn't have to know it either. Why should I crack my head with that? Let those other folks do it. And so long as you let those other folks do it, they will control you and your world. The world is becoming more and more scientific, not less. So the education of our children in general and the scientific education in particular, and with that strong cultural base, that is what is needed. There's no question about it. I never had a professor say to me, say for instance we're studying physics, that this is beautiful. I say it's beautiful because to me,
Yes, please, I'm glad.
What
Thank
you
you.
said.
I didn't know that I've been looking for prophecies that our people may have left us that would have shedded light on today's time, understanding that they studied the universe and they had great wisdom and the wisdom text and etc., which comes out of the pyramid. So I had been looking for, without realizing, all of the words of Solomon are really relative, because they are the words of the ancient Kemites, who wrote them and who was later adapted into the wisdom of Solomon. But yes, go ahead.
There's something that's really key that I think should be brought out also.
And did you know that if the slave issue is settled with the blacks in the United States, it'll be settled all over the world?
Why is that so?
Because the powerhouse for the black race is the blacks in the United States of America. For intelligence, economics, high tech, education, and political and economic development.
Isn't that a prejudicious statement, Dr. Brown?
No, that's a true statement. What would you say? What do you mean by that? Explain that.
Well, you said that the powerhouse of blacks in the world, of Africans in the world,
It's in the United States. Blacks in the United States.
and you said that in terms of intelligence, economics,
Yeah,
high tech,
right.
etc., etc. But there would be many Africans who would view that as
Cases on the sugarcane harvest, they would work blacks for 20 hours a day for about 10 weeks. Some blacks would die on the row at the end of the day. I have that in a piece of paper I have in my briefcase now. It would call them to their wake out or wake to death. A man 25 years old would be dead from harvesting sugarcane during the sugarcane grinding season. They wouldn't let him stop working until the 10 weeks was over. They'd beat him to death if he stopped. They let him sleep 1 or 2 hours and get back to work. He died. They said it was easy to replace a slave if he died. That's in writing. All that to make America rich.
What was the process of once the African came here, breaking the African? How was he treated? How was life?
Well, they would put him to work, watch him, beat him, and he would resist sometimes. But they would give him food, courses of food, and make him work. And if a mosquito bites you,
time, we were the only human beings in the world. Correct. You know, with all human beings were African. Mm-hmm. Then, you know, through migrations and travel and dispersions throughout the world, the human phenotype variegated, and we got these other races. And then psychologically,
ape species has the ape family has 3 species. It has the orangutan, it has the gorilla, it has the monkey. The orangutan has 3 series of DNA. Pretty smart animal, but not as smart as the gorilla. Gorilla, you can teach to interact with that computer. I mean, he can cut it on and off, you know. But he has 4 strands. He has 4 series of DNA. And he's not as smart as the chimpanzee, which has 5 strands of DNA. And you can teach a chimpanzee to type up to 200 words. They've taught him to type up to 200. He has 5. All human beings have 6 strands of DNA except Africans born below the Sahara. They have not.
Of our African essence. And when you defame that expression, you deny the essence. And what's real is my spirit, my African spirit. I express it as a black person, as a black man, and then the environment in which I live in has to also give license to that expression. So we should create aesthetic. We should create beauty that symbolically shows the African genius. If African children are involved, or African, not just children, all of us are living in that kind of experience. So these things get all connected together in terms of the ideas. And I was just reading a student of mine just sent me an email asking me to give her best wishes for an interview she's having on campus for this international study abroad program. But we didn't have the insight to talk about our practice that goes way back to the conversation about African genius and these alleles, these DNA alleles that we have greater. Maybe there's something we're not using anymore because we're using Europeans as the standard of what it means to be human. So we're lowering our capacity and our potential and possibility, whereas back in the day, our folks did it. We just didn't have the scholars to write and to verify, to justify our practice. And then we start giving.
See this dynamics going on both in Africa and here, but the problem is getting our people to even believe that such an occurrence has happened, that there is an entirely new world, that African people have been called the leadership by the Creator bringing this equation through an African. It serves the world,
yes,
but it comes through an African. Therefore, Africa has been chosen for this leadership.
And if we don't have confidence, we never become warriors. We never have the strength or the courage to stare down the enemy or to fight that which is dead. Educate just regular black women in our community around the issues of HIV/AIDS, the epidemiology of the AIDS, the way in which the virus is contracted. Can we also educate them about reclaiming traditions and rituals that they could reintroduce in their homes and in their community, and then literally certify them as healer women, and then let them just live in their community. They may be working in a bank, they may be school teachers, they may be unemployed, they may be welfare, but they've gone through this program and process, and now they're healing women, and then in doing what they do in their normal lives, they're able to identify where there is dis-at-ease and to rectify it. They're able to
any African that was ever born, to all Africans who will ever be born, to all that is African, Ashe.
They're doing all this stuff and they wonder where it comes from. And that is a cultural thing, because culture gives you a general design for living and patterns for interpreting reality. And so the you that they state as a way of asking, what is this group that's in front of me interested in, doesn't become targeting for communicating to us, but becomes that badge of their excluding themselves from the reality that is combined. And so if they can exclude themselves, then we know that our vested interest is not protected. And so we say, what do you mean by this you stuff? You in this stuff too. And so we try to bring them back in it and struggle that way, and then it becomes, well, you all need what? A salt water psychologist to help you work through interpersonal relationships. And so they get us all cracked. We figure we just don't know how to negotiate, we don't know how to communicate, we don't know how to talk with folk, and we got to figure out strategies for community. Expresses in concrete terms the invisible spirit and intention of a people. And so African art, black art, becomes important to infuse in the curriculum, because we're able to demonstrate that there is an unbroken continuity in African art from ancient Kemet and even pre-Kemet up until the time you see a brother doing graffiti on a wall in the subway. And if he understands that tradition and understands that, then African art is infused with the spirit of African people. The functional continuity of African art is important, because we need to see and understand the importance of symbolism. That's our language. Symbolism is our language. It gives meaning to the innate knowledge. You see, symbolism gives meaning to the innate knowledge. And what the African artist does is concretize in visual expression that innate knowledge. That's why folk would go to Africa and steal our stuff and come back and say, this is Cubanism and this is stuff. And they be just taking stuff and come back and just say it's theirs. And what do we do? We say, ain't no problem, go and create something else. I mean, it wasn't really no big deal, because we knew that the innate knowledge has no limits. As I see the black man, I can't be dissing the brother. Then there's another brother. I can't be talking about there's another brother doing the problem, because I see the relationship between me and we. I see the relationship between, and it's sometimes called the Christ, and it's sometimes called Shango, and it's sometimes called Allah, and it is sometimes called Oya, and it is sometimes called Olatumari, and it is sometimes called Atum. That Almighty God, Amun, Ptah, Ra, although hidden, is the source of all knowledge, all truth, and all wisdom. And I pray in what I share with you this evening that Amun, Tehuti, Orumila will be satisfied. I must begin my talk by addressing the title of Ancient Kemetic Thought and Law. Is to be. Because in being, one can exert their will and their intent. If you are a doing person, you can get distracted. And because of, again, our conceptual incarceration, we run around here thinking that who we are is what we do. And so when they said you were slaves, we thought, when they gave us slave work to do, we thought we were slaves. or at least we could have thought that we were slaves. But because we came from a tradition that Africans understood that who we are is that we be, that we knew we wasn't going to be no slave, even though we did slave work. See, so we have to begin to understand the reason why we're here in this room today is because our most immediate ancestors could spend 300 and 400 years doing slave work, but they never. It is essential. The essential thing is to rediscover the thread that connects them to the remotest past. Diop argues the essential thing to rediscover that thread that connects us to our remotest, as far back as we can go, ancestral past. What is the essential thing? That's what we have to ask. We can't deify Diop. We can't just say Diop's there and we got it and we can go now. Diop is a master teacher. He's giving us more questions on the exam than study guides. See, so we have to answer the principles of initiatory mastery, that our attitude is an attitude that's driven by the sense of appropriateness. You don't do anything and everything anywhere. That our attitude is driven by the sense of excellence, that whatever it is, we're going to do it more better. That our attitude is driven by faith that our teachers will teach us the truth. That our attitude is driven by being free from resentment when someone wrongs you. Sometimes we got to question that because we get wronged so many times that maybe we got to give some shit back to somebody, but we can refine some things if necessary. But we have to also talk about an attitude that says be free from resentment when you are wrong. And that sometimes we do wrong stuff to each other and we hold resentment that contaminates the relationship that we have in building the beloved community that Martin Luther King talks about. An attitude that says, first and foremost, it is our obligation and responsibility to teach in our children pride in their race. That we're not going to apologize for saying, yes, you are black, yes, you are African, and there is no one, nowhere better than you. We need to teach our children. We need to teach our children to have what Marcus Garvey used to call race men and race women, race pride. We to see that as part of our obligation for creating and manipulating and massaging the mental attitudes that represent the African way. And ultimately, we have to teach an attitude in our people that as they become more better and become the most better, more better person that's around, that in being more better, they must also be humble in the face of their community. That we can never let our more better separate us from our community. That humility is part and parcel of the African mental attitude as we create the African character. The attributes that are important that we've identified and used in our teachings and work in the African community, the attributes that are part of the mental traits are attributes of mastery. Not just learning, mastery. And again, in the 10 principles of initiatory mastery, the first mastery is mastery of one's own thought. We have to stop thinking like white people. We have to stop placing white people up in deification. The attack that I enjoyed by hanging out with Lenin is that I suggested in one discussion that Greek philosophy is vomit. And we should stop being the vomit drinkers. Now, let me take a minute to explain that, because if you don't think symbolically, you just think that I'm talking about this stuff is funky and nasty. If you understand that anytime the body goes into a new environment, its digestive system and its dietary habits become shocked by the new texture and the new quality of the substance that it must intake. And when you intake that substance and it is new to you, you either have diarrhea or you vomit until your system gets acclimated to the richness of the new substance. When Greece went into Africa under affirmative action programs, they took a rich diet of intellectual abilities in their system. The paleness of their system could not accommodate the richness of our diet, and so they began to vomit. And when they vomited, what the world received was Greek philosophy. Now, for the record, in case there is a brother or sister who's a reporter that's going to report this again, I want to break this down because sometimes symbolic thought is hard to comprehend. The statement, the admonition, don't be the vomit drinkers, is to say that if you see vomit and you are a scientist, you don't drink the vomit, you analyze the texture and the quality and the ingredients of the substance to determine what was its original form. So black scholars, black intellectuals, rather than drink Greek philosophy as vomit, we must know Greek philosophy, analyze it, critique it, determine what was its original form, its original constitution, so we can go back to the original source. That's the purpose. That's the purpose of our scholarship. Our scholarship is to recognize that there is no substance, no state, no condition that we cannot master and understand, and if it is our pleasure to determine how it was derived based upon its connection to the original thing of all things, which is the African way. The attributes of the African mental trait then is to have the cognitive flexibility to be able to deal with all that which is Western thought, and at the same time go to the left side and deal with that which gave birth to Western thought, and don't see them as antithetical or opposite continuums. That Western thought is truly the thinking of children, and that if we are to reclaim our position as the parents and the adult in the continuum of humanity, then we must begin to think as adults. And we see our children having temper tantrums because they cannot express themselves in a way that we as adults are accustomed to. We don't say that ours is in opposition to the child. We simply recognize that the child is immature. We don't have to talk about white thought being in opposition to black thought, because that's not true. That white thought is infantile thinking, and that if you love children, if you have the desire, you may want to give them an educational system that will allow them to evolve to the higher level. African-centered education is good for any human being, because to be human is to be African. And the final two attributes that I would like to offer to you, or the final three attributes that are part of our mental trait, is courage, is an attribute. Courage, the ability to struggle, to not be afraid, to tell the truth in our intellectual, mental enterprise. Defiance, the ability to stand up and say, I defy you to prove me wrong. But the issue that we can take from the methodologies and the epistemologies of the Western world is that we can always throw to them the no. I argue that Africa is the origin of humanity. If you think that is wrong, then I will recast it as the null hypothesis and suggest that you simply disprove it. I don't have to prove it. I do not scientifically have to prove it. You have to disprove it. That is defiance. And the final attribute is integrity. That we must, in our beingness, in our becoming, see as a mental trait integrity. Integrity, to be able to stand upright, to be able to not compromise on the truth, to be able to say, I will not even mask it and make it palatable in mixed company. The truth is the truth, wherever we find it. It is the African-centered movement that collapsed these notions that Jake has offered us, because the final third point that he makes in the positions of African-centered education, African-centered movement, is the acknowledgement that the precondition for the freedom of the African mind is the development of healthy human functioning African people, is the massive African-centered education and re-education of African people throughout the world. That's our charge. That's what we are creeping up to. That is the movement that African people are now clarifying as our movement for the 90s. The massive re-education and education of African people that's centered in an African pedagogy and praxis. That's not just about curriculum, it's about the relationship in the classroom, it is about the relationship of the school to the community, it is about the development of human beings, that are the objective being to promote the next generation of African people. The only definition of education that we should hold in front of ourselves is a definition that says education is simply and most assuredly the process of intentionally and objectively reproducing and refining the best of ourselves. That's what education is. Reproduce and refine the best of ourselves. If we look at our grandchild and we can't see a refinement of our great-grandfather, we have done miseducation. If we allow an educational system to educate our children so that when they come home, we do not recognize them as a refinement of the best of ourselves, we have submitted our children to genocide. We have to understand what it's about. The intent of education is to reproduce and refine the complex of mental and ethical traits which signify the distinctive quality of African people, in which in turn maximize our human functioning and our human potential. The purpose of education is simply and straightforwardly, in my estimation, self and social sovereignty, rulership. The purpose of education is not to get a good job. The purpose of education is not to be able to get you somewhere in the suburbs with the aliens. The purpose of education is self and social sovereignty. Education for mastery, education for rulership, education for governance relative to self, family, community, society, and the world. When we send our child to school, when we send children to school, as we reinstitute, reclaim, rescue, and reestablish an African-centered education, then we can guarantee that when that child comes home, he will be on the path of development where he or she will feel comfortable and natural with rulership, comfortable and natural with governorship, comfortable and natural with understanding that their divinely inscribed relationship is to be the ruler of self, the ruler of family, the governor of community, the governor of society, and ultimately the African reclamation of the governance of the world. We are psychologists, each and every one of us. And in the book African Psychology, I would like to close with a poem that I wrote as a preface to this book. The poem says to black psychologists, I was writing to my colleagues, but I'm sharing this with all of us now that I think it's apropos. We, African people, are standing in the river. Alone, we shall be swept away by its currents. United, we can know the many rivers to cross. Individually, we shall drown in its depths. Combined, the river will guide us to a higher ground. Singularly, we are halted by the torrent of its banks. As one people, the river shall carry us to a distant place. As one people, the river shall return us to the source. Black psychologists, black people, we are standing in the river, transformed and transforming. Thank you very much.
I got a sister that I'd like to acknowledge again, and this is Wade's wife, Sister Vera Nobles, who's the strength and determination behind this black man. Let's give her a hand. On behalf of Dr. Clark, Dr. Crothers, Sister Keffa, Sister Franklin, Sister Eileen, and our other distinguished elders, we'd like to also recognize a few people in the audience. We have Dr. Rosalind Jeffries is somewhere. Where is Dr. Rosalind Jeffries? The strength and determination behind her man, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. You can tell I've been here a long time. They know I need my glasses. I was going, what? There's another strong sister in the audience I'd like to recognize. Dr. Patricia Newton, SecMet. Where you at, SecMet? Paving the way, the African defender in the Baltimore area. We also have another distinguished guest, Reverend Walter McCroy. He's from Chicago, McCrae from Chicago. He's the author of Black Presence in the Bible, 2 volumes. We also have Mr. Anthony Browder from Washington, D.C., the Browder Files. We have Dr. Sharshi McIntyre, Dr. Obati Shaka. Both will be presenting tomorrow. We also have Dr. Maxine Mims from Tacoma, Washington. And there are many, many more, too numerous to mention. And to all of you brothers and sisters, this is the time in the program that we're to have the summation. But I must say that Dr. Wade Nobles has said it all. We have a very full program tomorrow. We're going to start at 9 o'clock in the morning. What we have scheduled this afternoon is, if you want to, or this evening really, is we do have shuttle service available from here to Sweet Honey on the Rock. We just have a very few tickets left. How many people still are interested in going to see Sweet Honey in the Rock? Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. How many tickets you want? Okay, let me see your hands over here. Okay, so we have the shuttle service available. We'll be leaving immediately from here, going directly to Symphony Hall. And so we need you to get your tickets and get on the shuttle service. The shuttles will be taking the people from here to Symphony Hall first, since we have an 8 o'clock deadline. I want to say to all of you, I want to thank you for your patience and your understanding. The vendors are still open downstairs. They'll be open for another half an hour. And then we'll start taking people back to the bus or back to the hotel. So I want to say on behalf of ASCAC, we thank you for coming out today. We'll see you at 9 o'clock in the morning. 9 o'clock in the morning we'll be having regional meetings. Come to this room for your regional assignment. And at 10 o'clock sharp, we will be starting the business meeting. Now I realize we've been late every day this week starting the program. But tomorrow it will be very crucial because we'll be getting feedback from the workshops. So without any further ado, I'm going to be with my husband. So y'all, I'm going to say to you all, Hetepu, peace and love. Hotep. Hotep. Yes, my love. Yeah. Hotep, I was gonna get their attention on this Sweet Honey on the Rock. Hotep, everybody. Hotep. There was some discussion in terms of price. The price for the tickets on Sweet Honey in the Rock is only $16. It doesn't matter if you're an ASCAC member or not. We still have about 10 or 12 tickets left, and we need for you to, get the tickets so we can all leave and get there for when the program opens. Who has the tickets? I think they're out at the registration table out in the hallway. Hotep, y'all rest well. Hotel, motel, you don't have to go home, but you gotta leave out of here. Take your trash with you, y'all. Come on, help us clean the place up. What's the hotel, motel? Sister Dugan, see our guests and go with
methodology and the theory. They have been doing for the last 300 years. Because we have not taken the time to understand what it means to be Africans in a non-African reality. And so all we can do is produce what is consistent with a non-African experience.
Their chief pharaoh, their Nana, the president of the Association of Black Social Workers, Black Psychologists. And I present you my brother, my partner, doing yeoman work with the
I have the honor of leading as their national president from the Department of Black Studies and the School of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State University, and from the Institute for the Advanced Study of Black Family Life and Culture. And I bring you greetings from these places because these are the places, with the addition of ASCAC, that has nurtured the thinking that I believe is going to be critical in the they have been doing for the last 300 years. Because we have not taken the time to understand what it means to be Africans in a non-African reality. And so all we can do is produce what is consistent with a non-African experience because we haven't got in touch with ourselves as being African. The duality of knowing and being for Africans living in a non-African reality is driven by I'm calling two laws. And so I have the authority. Every time we look at issues about what's good for our children, we say, what's good for our children? People attack and say, wait a minute, what about those other kids? We say, you're right, what about the other kids? That's the sheepdog response. See, we're taught to believe that our Africanness is of no value. So the very thing, the energy, the power, the force that makes this universe, that your beauty is tied to your conduct. Why did Martin Luther King reach deep in that unknown place when he was trying to make an analogy? The point is that as we begin to make contact with ourselves, as we stop thinking that Africa is the land of Tarzan, and Africans on the continent stop thinking that to come to America to avoid those black criminals, as we get close.
Keynote speaker here this evening. He was born and reared in Jamaica and
by these European ruling classes, and basically looking at the map of Africa and dividing it up into nice little squares, oblivious to ethnic boundaries, linguistic groups, historical traditions, and so on. They didn't care about that. They could actually make straight lines, not looking at the way in which they actually imbibed. And it's difficult not to imbibe you when you're not given any alternative. Sheikh Anta Diop wasn't writing at that time. You couldn't read his books. Insofar as you got any information about Africa, barring a minuscule amount of people with integrity who wrote about Africa at the time, insofar as you read a book on Africa, this nonsense, this crap would be shoved down your throat. And therefore, it's not surprising that our people became confused. It's not surprising that we ourselves began to doubt our very capacities. We had to struggle against that doubt. We had to struggle against it on the basis, etc. Huge in their area. It was a remarkable thing. There was never
for weeks to come. This Saturday is the first
be able to pinpoint the particularly distinguished
of the major pyramids. It's 40 to a perspective how large it is. This is in search of early man. Now we're going to start on the archaeological proof of what we're talking about. This slide just illustrates that there are archaeological fossils remain that you can use any number of methods to date, so that you see that they are. Body tells you, European, that you can't learn chess. You invented it. And as Brother Maddox said, he is the descendant of those who invented law. And here is the Valley of the Queens. Here is a queen. Notice she's on her throne in a beautiful silk and a beautiful headpiece, sitting on kente cloth, throne, playing. We move on. Just showing you the number system again, 1 and 10. Number system again, all of the numbers, 10s, base 10. And to show you that you invented the ordinal numbers. Look at this symbol of infinity. Showing you what was in Nubia before Egypt. You look at when they broke up, this Republic of Khuzestan was the Asian of all the republic, the only republic featuring this. This is the picture of the actual mission of Vanuatu that has been established, and they're there to work with you, and they want to link. That's why we all link up. This is going to touch Europe a little bit, but to show you what you give. This is God Imhotep that gave the world medicine.
And then, of course, there was Miss Woolfolk, a little old, gnarled lady about 80 years old, who saw me when I was getting ready to drop out of school myself, in a new and hostile and alien environment. Graduating from school with no prospect of going to school because I didn't have money. She was the one who went down to a foundation, invited Thomas Jesse Jones to do a study of independent black education. Why? Because they began to get these African immersion schools that were created by African people. They had independent schools. So they decided that if you're going to have independent schools, maybe they need to be accredited in some way. So Jesse Jones was an unofficial accrediting agency, and based on the study that he did of independent African education, he concluded that not one school measured up to standard, and they closed all of them and made the rule that Africans could have a school as long as they had a white board of trustees. That's Thomas Jesse Jones. Now, because
explain something about your money that you have paid on this store. It is, we do. People are complaining to me about mosquitoes. Some people want mosquito repellent. These mosquitoes. Grandmother Ethiopia tell me, all of them tell me, it's my birthday. That is a new thing. How the hell is you going to be pregnant and still got hymen? But you see, they willfully mix up the word hymen and virgin to be one. That machine, that contraption, You take those children and they know they had the basics in Quran. They had basics in Arabic literature. Not one of them completed the story. For those of you who are Christians and born again or not, you may think that it is something exceedingly new. But you don't forget that long before this concept of the Virgin Mary, the African, and you may go to the temple of Sataywan at a place on the pyramid with the sunburst, God Ra, the symbol of God Ra around it. But you never ask. You see an American dollar. America has no pyramids. Huh? But you never ask, where did this come from? George Washington and others who were Masons adopted these symbols from Egypt. The only one in the cabinet who was not a Mason in Washington's cabinet was Benjamin Franklin, because he was a Quaker. And there was an African in the cabinet, don't forget. A man born in a place called Nevis. His mother was an African, his father was an Englishman.
Question. Educator and publisher in this ocean of white world supremacy, and not to allow white
Will everyone once again join me in according Dr. Ben?
From birth, parents must be where our liberation starts from. May I just share an example of this with you? At this time, may we be graced with the presence of two young brothers from our Saturday morning Institute for Youth who will come forward to read, and I understand they're not going to read it, they have memorized it. An amended poem from Haki Madhubuti's collection.
into multi-talented family.
Dr. Ben, we love you, and we thank you.
Our fight is to be an inspired example of a caring, healthy, intelligent
Kings. We adults must continue to sit at the...
Okay, so having editorialized in that fact and looking at these questions at just what happened where